and welcome back to the Simply Trade Roundup. My name's Anik. I'll be your host today, as I am always, as you would know if you've been listening. Maybe you have not. Maybe this is your first time. If it is, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Hope to have you here every Monday or whenever you can listen, whenever you have the time. I think it's best to listen to podcasts in your car specifically, but it's everyone else's preference, you know? I'm just sharing my little hack. Today is an interesting episode. It is currently, we're recording this on August 21st. I'm giving you a date because things in trade just change so fast. And unfortunately, I can't change that. I usually can make some calls that the weather turns out good, but I can tell you how trade changes. Unfortunately, I haven't figured that out, everyone. But today we will be focusing on the automotive industry, and I think that has been has made a huge transition from the start. But recently, we've seen more and more about it. So I have a special guest that I thought was perfect for this episode. His name is, okay, hopefully I don't butcher it for you, Philippe Saborenko. Did I say that right?
Philip, either is fine with me.
Philip, okay. Saborenko, or how would you say it? Saborenko, okay, perfect. So, I like different names. It's great. So if you mess up a name, that's how you know you have a unique name, right? He's a licensed customs broker, and he's also a master customs specialist with a specialized focus on automotive trade compliance. And that's exactly what we need. You have a deep technical expertise in tariff classification, import auditing, and regulatory strategy, which that's perfect because that's kind of what we're talking about today, right? We're tying the automotive industry with, tariffs and everything that's happening right now because there's so many changes. And with that being said, I kind of want to start off with how much has it changed? How much are things different now than they were before, or have they changed dramatically? What is the outlook on that?
I think it depends on who you ask. I think that for the day-to-day stuff, not in terms of supply chain, not enough time has passed to really see the big shifts that I think either this administration is looking for or even the companies themselves are looking for. So right now, currently, for the most part, we're still probably using the same suppliers, still probably going the same routes. Of course, our biggest partners still being Canada and Mexico. So that the actual supply chain hasn't really had time yet to restructure. I think what has changed is the path forward. Things used to be a lot more clear prior to January 20th than they are today, right? We knew where we were safe. We knew that Canada, Mexico, EU, these were our safe places where we can invest in the future. And I think now we are kind of taking a step back and thinking, okay, what's next?
Yeah. You brought up the EU, good point, because there was a recent EU-US trade deal. Actually, it was kind of, I feel like, finished today, but we also had a quick talk before, and it's going like back and forth, not finalized yet. I guess they established a 15% US tariffs on incoming European cars, down from earlier threats of 30%, but kind of still double the pre-2025 rate. So how does that impact the automotive industry? So we're not quite finalized yet.
It doesn't look. It looks like they have the details. They don't have the dates for us. At this point, sooner rather than later, I think is what we're all hoping for.
And then I also saw something that was kind of brought out I read this PDF. It was from AIAG, and they wrote about the push for forced labor due diligence. That seems like it's coming back up in the automotive, especially in the automotive industry, and that U.S., Canada, EU, and Germany require automakers and their suppliers to proactively screen, report, and remediate risk of forced labor. Is this something that's new, or has that been done, or is it just being more enforced?
I don't think it ever really went away, to be honest with you, since at least for the automotive industry, with the UFLPA coming into action some years ago now, it definitely has been something on everyone's mind. It definitely has been something that has led to shifting of the supply chain, or if not shifting, then at least being more involved and have more intimate knowledge. Companies have definitely invested a good amount of money into making sure that their supply chain is free of that forced labor, because the UFLPA itself is so wide reaching that even if your products aren't subject or made with forced labor, if they come out of the same facility or same overall conglomerate that does use forced labor, you can still be penalized for it. And of course, nobody wants to have their car company on the front page of the New York Times or New York Post as X automaker caught using slave labor in China. That's just not good PR. So it definitely has been something that is still on everyone's mind. And with the new enforcement, I think it'll just come back to slide its way back to the top. But I don't think it ever really went anywhere. We're always looking out for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Would you say that tariffs and forced labor are the biggest struggles in the automotive industry, or what do you see as the biggest issue or right currently that people or professionals in the automotive industry are focusing on?
I think that question kind of there's like the back end question and the front end question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the front end question is what are auto manufacturers struggling with, and I would say that right now it's the sales. Right on the front end, we are seeing some lacking consumer confidence.
Okay.
We're seeing less purchases overall. We're seeing the price of the average car kind of skyrocket. I think now the average new car is over $40,000, maybe closer to $50,000.
Yeah.
And you combine that with the interest rates, and for most people, new cars have become a little bit unaffordable. So we're seeing the automotive market kind of have to reorganize itself as to how can we get people back into new cars. So that definitely is one struggle. The back end struggle, I think, right now is the lack of certainty. Prior to the tariffs, you knew what your production is going to look like by the time the parts start rolling out of the factory. For the automotive market, the planning stages are years in advance. I mean, right now we're calculating our cost for parts that aren't even going to leave the factory until 2030, 2031, right? How can you plan production? How can you plan your costs when you don't even know what the tariffs are going to be tomorrow, much less what they're going to be 5, 6, 7 years from now? In the middle of all that, we also have the USMCA, which is going to be, I don't want to say renegotiated, but
2026.
26, yes, correct. So
Yeah.
2026, we're going to see the three countries sit back down, have a new discussion, what is working, what isn't working. And with the current state of tariffs and the relationship between Canada, US, and Mexico, I wouldn't be surprised if the USMCA that we have today isn't the same one that we're going to have in 2026. So there's definitely a lot of stuff going on right now, and I think the automotive industry is feeling it from all sides.
Yeah, it's actually funny that you brought up the front lines, because I recently went with my friend to Mercedes for her to buy a new car, and I was asking the how do you say, the salesperson. I knew him, and I asked him. I said, you know, have you been selling more cars, or how has business been? And he did say it slowed down, but he said, I'm like, but if you want to buy a car, you should do it now because it's going to get more expensive. So he's seeing a slowdown, but like what the people are waiting for is never, at this moment it's not going to come because it's lower prices, and the lower prices are just not attainable for businesses like that right now because they obviously have to pay higher tariffs. And and it's funny to kind of, you know, connect what you do and what you talk about on a daily basis, and then talk in the outside world and see what they're saying, and then you're like, huh, we talk about that all the time on the back end, but here we are and it's actually happening, you know. It's actually real. We're not just talking about it. It's out there in the world, which is kind of crazy. And it you know, so if you want to buy a car, just probably do it now at this point.
No,
That's your reminder.
no, and that's I think that's great kind of I think that's a great kind of anecdote because I think that exactly shows the position that automakers are in now, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the all about the end customer. It's all about getting you to buy the car. And so on one hand, you have the back end stuff, which is all the tariffs. The cost of production has gone up for every single automaker, regardless of if you're selling in the US, I should say, regardless of how many of your components are US, it doesn't matter. The parts have gone up, but wages haven't gone up. The amount of money that the average
Yeah.
person can afford to spend on a new car hasn't gone up. So it's not like these automakers can just slap 25% across their entire lineup and expect everyone to rush the doors. So
you
they, they're,
you
yep,
just said something interesting. Sorry. You said that even if the parts are from the US, they have increased.
of course. Yeah, of course. Because I mean, it's there is no supply chain that is 100% US
US.
from the ground to final production.
Mhm.
Especially in the automotive industry, it's not uncommon to have a part that was, let's say forged in the US, heat treated in Canada, back to the US for honing, and then into Mexico for final assembly. You can have one part cross the border three, four, five times before it finds its way into the vehicle or into the component that's going into that vehicle.
And then there's the whole steel and aluminum. Is that a
Steel
big
and
impact on the
aluminum.
automotive industry? I mean, I
Yes.
would think so, but is that something that obviously makes things more expensive? But like in the compliance area, that must be, you know, just working overtime. I feel like because we see it in all industries right now, the steel and aluminum. There's a lot of different factors that go into it, and a lot of research that has to be done. And you know, you really need to know your supply chain. How has that affected the automotive industry?
Sure. So that's so it's was just Friday, and I think it was 5:30 p.m. that they had released an additional 407 HTS codes that will now
Yes.
be subject to steel and aluminum. And when you look at the 232 list, steel, aluminum, and automotive, there's actually very little overlap between those three lists. I guess four with copper. There is shockingly little overlap. So right now is when everyone is going back to their classifications, because if you are classifying it under one HTS code, you may be subject to the automotive tariff, which if it's coming out of Canada or Mexico, you get to still use USMCA, and your automotive 232 tariff becomes zero.
Yeah.
If you're on the steel and aluminum list, USMCA doesn't apply. You're still going to pay that 50% on that component, on that part, depending on how much steel or aluminum content is in it. So, talk about the back end where classification is definitely something that uh, everyone is now really, really worried about and talking to their brokers. Not because classification wasn't important before, but when you attach a uh, high tariff to it, it's going to get people asking questions. What can we do to save money? I think is the question that everyone is trying to answer.
Yeah, and I'm thinking. I know you have a course coming up. When is it? September 16th, actually. The automotive classification. It's an advanced course, very industry specific, and will that go over some of these things that are happening at the moment, or how people would deal with them, or in what sense are you talking about the automotive industry in that course?
Yeah, so I think that something when people think about difficult classifications, I think most brokers immediately think about chemicals or textiles or footwear, apparel. Like those are, I think, are like what everyone kind of fears. You see one of those questions on the
Yeah.
license exam and you start cringing. But automotive can be just as complicated and just as nuanced. You know, I think there's this idea that if it goes into a vehicle, it's obviously going to be Chapter 87. Just pick a number, you'll probably be okay, and it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think that's where we're seeing now this uh, refocus on classification for automotive.
Yeah, because I think that misclassification can get you very much in trouble, and especially when it comes to, automotive parts are not cheap. It's not like something you're buying for $5 or whatever. So the repercussions are probably much bigger than for other certain products. Um, and it did. And if you misclassify nowadays, it might even affect the tariffs you're paying. So in that end, you're going to be worse off if you're misclassifying. So does the course go over misclassification and such?
Yeah, we definitely cover some common misclassifications. The CBP does do a pretty good job of trying to keep everyone in the automotive industry up to date. So there definitely is a portion of the class dedicated to just common misclassifications, common components that sound like they go in 87, but actually may not, and vice versa, and how to make those kinds of decisions. And just to add on to your thought, the classification, especially for automotive, is important because that's what's going to drive your free trade programs. If you're not using the right classification, or if you're using a classification that isn't the best fit for a component, that's what's going to drive your USMCA regional value content. You might be classifying something which puts it as a core component, and you can't get USMCA certified because you're not reaching that 75% regional value content, when it turns out your part can meet it because it's actually not that HTS code, it's a different one, which will either be 70%, 65%, or not have one at all. So
Yeah, and then I'm also thinking about electric vehicle components, because I know that's a whole different area. I mean, we're talking tariffs, we're talking forced labor, we're talking misclassification, and then we're talking about the electric vehicle industry, right? Because that's a whole. I mean, automotive industry. Obviously, it's like the umbrella of it, but it's kind of on its own because the U.S. has its own relationship with electric vehicles because things have a little bit of changed, I would say. But is that covered, or what do you have to say on that part of the industry?
I like how you phrased it. America and Americans in general, I feel, have like a very love-hate relationship with
Yeah.
EVs. At one point, everybody was looking to get one, then they fell off, then COVID happened and everyone wanted one again, and now they're kind of on the back burner. Very, very love-hate story with us in the EVs. But yeah, no, we definitely do go over that in the course. EVs are newer, the parts of the EVs, I think, is a newer challenge for people who have been in automotive. When if you've been working in automotive for 10, 15, 20 years, you know what a torque converter is, you know what an engine is, you know what wheel hub bearings, and you had fun with bearings, you love bearings, and now you're looking at this inverter or you're looking at this e-motor and you don't even know where to start. It's a completely different animal. A lot of those components actually aren't Chapter 87, and so it's a good learning experience, I think, just for anyone who is in the sector, even outside of the sector, just because it's kind of hard to escape Chapter 85 these days.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, there's so many questions around the automotive industry itself, and then there's the electric vehicle, and then there's more questions, and it just goes down a deep dive hole. So overall, I kind of want to ask, how do you stay, agile and swift and building the compliance around all this drama? I want to call it drama right now, because you have to stay proactive, but it's also hard to stay proactive within uncertainty, right? But you also cannot stay still, because if you stay still, you're just letting it happen to you and you're just not ready. So how do you react, staying compliant, and what can you do?
Yeah, I know. That's I think that's the question everyone is asking, and I hope you don't expect me to give you
No,
the
I
only.
don't. I
Like, if I
don't.
could
I
answer
really
that
don't.
question, I think it's something that we in the compliance profession hate. We hate being reactive. We
Yeah.
want to be proactive. We want to know what's going on. We want to be able to tell our whether internal or external customers, anyone that relies on us for our information, we want to be able to tell them with certainty, this is your classification, this is your tariff rate, this is how much this container or this package is going to cost you to clear.
Yeah.
And we now find ourselves in a situation where we're reactive. We don't know what the tariff is tomorrow. We don't know what it's going to be next month, and we are now having to come up with new strategies to kind of deal with that. So I think you have to stay informed. I think that's something that is core to everything. You have to stay informed. I don't think that you should only rely on your brokers or only on your trade partners to tell you what's going on. You have to stay informed. For better or for worse, Trade Now is a centerpiece article for news sites. You got to be on CNN, Fox, MSNBC, pick your poison. You have to be reading what's going on. I will tell you that nothing about these tariffs should have surprised anyone who was paying attention prior to the election. I know that's something that a lot of people kind of like to talk about, that, oh, who could have known? We got caught on the back foot. And that's just not the case. If the administration has been very clear with what it's trying to do and how it's going to do it. Yes, the numbers may change. Yes, the countries may change, but we know what products are affected.
Yeah.
Semiconductors is next. We know that. Lumber is next. We know that. You have to keep up to date. And I think the second one that I find myself turning to is you have to use AI. I know, like, that's going to be another tough pill to swallow for some people, but like, you got to use it.
Yeah.
It's here. It works. Don't use it to classify everything for you. Don't let it do all of the thinking for you. But I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a 30-page Federal Register notice, throwing it into Chat GPT and asking, like, hey, can you summarize this for me? Or what in here do I need to pay attention to? The amount of Federal Register notices hitting us every single week, it just keeps increasing.
Yeah.
Yes, you should read them. Yes, you should know where to find them. But there's nothing wrong with asking the computer to help you out a little bit.
Yeah.
Definitely use these tools.
Well, Philip, that was an incredible conversation. I know it's short-lived because, we don't really know what's going to happen. Who knows? Again, it's August 21st. We're talking now. When this comes out on, I believe it's August 25th. We might be at 45%. Who knows? For Europe, who knows? But I'm thankful for the conversation because it was much more past, just tariffs, and also how to kind of get through this and navigate. If you're in the industry, it's such a specific, niche industry, even though it's huge, but if you're in it, it feels niche. I feel like that's how compliance feels, at least. So thank you so much for sharing it. And I know your course is coming up, and I know I will be looking forward to it. It's a 3-day mini course. I'm just gonna have to do a little pitch here. Automotive Classification Advanced, September 16, 17, 18. And really, it sounds long, right? People think that they're gonna be sitting there the entire day. No, you're not. You get 1 hour with you. They get 1 hour with you each day during lunchtime, I would say. Ask questions, listen to you, explain some of these things, go in depth a little bit more, and then do their own thing, on-demand work, which they can do at any time, which is like so easy. I mean, it's better than sitting through, an all-day course, if that works for some people, right? I mean, if you want to do that too, you can definitely do that. I think it's great. I think it's great if you do any training, but this one is a great one, and it's advanced. So if you feel like you need an advanced course, go check it out. We will link it below under Global Training Center. So thank you so much for coming on, Philip, and I'm excited for your course to start in September.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. And for our listeners, thank you so much for listening. We will be back, or I will be back, with another guest next Monday. Actually, I do believe it's a careers episode, which will be great. I have some fun stuff in store. So keep listening. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.